And the idea, of course, is to start with one style and then chronologically make our way up through different styles. So it's going to start with Neoclassical, go to Medieval, Steampunk, Cyberpunk, then all the way up to Futuristic and make use of that hype.
Hello, I'm ThaMango, and today I'm going to be transforming Grian's Season 9 HermitCraft base. My plan is to bring to life the original ideas that Grian had for his base, expanding the build and adding in loads of interior. Before I begin, I just want to say that me and Grian have very different building styles. I'm not trying to one-up him with this video or anything like that. He's a much better builder than me, so I'm hoping to learn some techniques by working on this build, and just thought this would be a fun video to make. Anyway, let's begin. It feels so odd being in this world, but welcome to HermitCraft, or at least the world download of HermitCraft. As you can see, I've got Grian's original base loaded up, and I'm so excited to work on it. I decided to start right from the bottom, patching up some areas which have been left out under the rock, which you'd never even normally see. I just filled in the floors and added in a couple of supports which join it to the rock. Before I began expanding onto the build with new areas, I wanted to edit the original build to fit my build style a bit more. I wanted to create a sort of hybrid style between mine and Grian's. I made sure to keep Grian's palette gradients and shaping, while adding a lot of extra details to fit my style. Each of these structures that come together to form this mega base are a lot smaller than the builds I normally work with, so this was a very new experience for me. Under the buildings and the rocks, I added hanging drip leaves to work as vines. These wouldn't be possible to add in survival mode, so I thought they would be a good addition to add now. Moving on to the central part of the build, this was probably the most important structure to get right. As this works as the entrance to the base, it's where the player's eyes would go first. I wanted to really put a lot of effort into the detailing here. I expanded the central diamond to make it much more of a centerpiece for the build, and to make it more of a flex on the other hermits. Moving around to the staircase that joins up the lower base, I just pretty much thickened up all of the details to accentuate the shape more, and then added some extra lighting to make it glow more at night. I really liked the look of solar lanterns on this part of the build. Finally, for the lower area's exterior, there was this huge side building to transform. I removed a couple of the windows to accentuate the remaining ones more, adding in some more window decorations and potted alliums. On the side, I also turned this area into an elytra takeoff area, or just a nice looking balcony for when you don't feel like flying. As I worked my way up the building, I just carried on this style with some extra small details, and more end rods to add light. To fill in this dead space on the rock, I thought it would be cool to add a magical looking rune, to fit the mysterious theme of the entity. Next up was the part I'd been dreading, the interior. I thought it'd be best to get this out of the way before moving on to the rest of the base. It was hard to decide what to do for the interior, as there wasn't much room to work with. I know Grian mentioned adding a hall in here before, but I wasn't sure how to fit it in. Instead, I decided to make a magical cavern. I built up the walls by hand and used a gradient similar to the one used on the exterior of the rocks. I used the floors that Grian had already marked out, creating a glowing lake at the bottom of the rock using frog lights and stained glass. For the platforms, I made them look similar to a dock, adding lanterns lining them for light. For the main dome that you enter to get inside, I added some basic details, as well as a cool lantern and a G on the floor, in case Grian ever forgets that this is his base. I then added one last detail to make it feel more like a HermitCraft base. Moving back to the exterior, I added a couple of touch-ups to the nether portal. It's my favourite part of the base and I didn't want to make too many changes, and so I just switched the glowberry bushes to drip leaves, added in some stairs to the rocks to make them look more worn, and then added in some glowing lights radiating from the rocks, to make the portal look even more magical at night time. The build was looking great, and so next I moved on to editing the medieval area. My plan for this part of the build was to edit the existing castle structure and then move on to expanding the area onto the nearby boulder, just to flesh it out a bit more. As per usual, I thickened up the existing details and added in some extra small details, like more fences, lanterns and balconies. I noticed that Grian used a different gradient in this area, which I tried to replicate wherever I could. I also added some mossy areas to the walls like he had done in some spots, which helped make the build look even more aged and added a nice colour contrast. I also ended up adding a lot more deep slate to the area as I think it fit the medieval part quite well. After editing the walls, I added some more vegetation to the nearby area, with some grass, more vines and a couple of brown mushrooms growing out of parts of the island. As well as this, I added in a couple of more lights into the rocks, like the glowing rune on the lower island. All of this just helped the build really come to life. And now expanding the medieval area, I added in a couple of small structures on this other boulder. Building my own designs from the ground up was extremely difficult, as I had to try and replicate Grian's style while also incorporating my own style at the same time. I really like the end result though, as I think it fits in perfectly with the rest of the build, and it capped off the medieval area of the base perfectly. With that finished, it was time to start a brand new area, which would be the first theme that doesn't already exist on the base. This would be the Cyberpunk area. I wanted to form this area using a lot of smaller buildings, sort of like a city. I wanted there to be a lot going on with loads of different styles, colours and building types. I also made sure to incorporate loads of lighting, so at night time this area really lights up in multiple neon colours. I don't really build Cyberpunk often, so this area was pretty difficult to create. Warped planks must be the block I use the most in this area. I really liked the colour of them and thought they perfectly fit a Grian build. I've never actually built with them before though, so this was my first time. To make the area look slightly more industrial, I added in a fan ventilation unit on the side of the larger structure. This also helped to add some kinetic energy to the build. I added some walls around the outside of this building as well to create a small balcony. I wanted the area to also look kinda magical, and so I decided to create a small blossoming tree, which would be entirely made up of glass panes instead of leaves. I used leaves while designing it just to get an idea of what it would look like before switching them to sign panes. I also added in some amethyst clusters on top of it to look like blossoms, as well as end rods hanging off of it like vines to help it glow more at night time. I swear every time I add a cool tree to a build, it ends up being my favourite part of the entire project. I felt that the Cyberpunk area looked a bit small, so I expanded it across to a nearby boulder, adding in a small farming area. This would include potato farms, which would be positioned high above the world. Here you can also find a small bridge, which offers an amazing view of HermitCraft. I then joined the two areas together with this huge archway, which links all the way back down to the medieval area. On the lower half of the arch, I added a small medieval structure just to help the archway blend more smoothly between the two themes. I then built up a few more houses before adding in some more boulders to work with. I tried my best to keep these in theme with the ones Grian made, using the same kind of blocks. I then built one last towering structure for the Cyberpunk area, which would expand upwards into the Futuristic area. This would be the tallest point at the base, reaching the build height limit. I tried to use lots of quartz and cyan glass, inspired by Grian's Season 6 megabase. I kept the design relatively simple, incorporating a white gradient wherever I could. I wanted to do something special to cap off the base, and so I went down into the Rift's cave and packaged up Grumbot so I could move them to the top of the base. I felt bad for them being stuck all alone in the cave, and so now they'd finally be able to look over the entirety of HermitCraft while everyone else is gone. I built a bunch of wires connecting them to the base, and then built up a couple of more futuristic towers to fit the theme of the area. A couple of these would be floating, with blue fire jets holding them up in the sky. As you can see, I used loads of frog lights, so this area looks amazing at night time, as you'll see in a minute. While building the area, I went back and forth, adding details to the Cyberpunk area simultaneously, including a couple of holographic advertisements. To finish the Cyberpunk area, I added in some small floating computer parts, all linked up to Grumbot. I also added in some sculk blocks just to tie the area together. Right as I thought I was done, I noticed that I forgot the steampunk area, and so I just built a couple of metallic gears into the side of the lower rock, between the medieval and cyberpunk areas. And that was it.